Climate Change and Consciousness Book Fair, in which we will feature books that have sprung like blossoms out of the seedbed of the original Climate Change and Consciousness event that I am the vision holder for, the founder of Climate Change and Consciousness. And I will speak to those origins shortly. But first of all, I want to acknowledge that when we created the timeline for this week-long series, we did it on the basis of the availability of the presenters. And then, of course, it came to our attention, the somber nature of today. And I have to say that that seems to be part of the biofield of climate change and consciousness. When I first envisioned it and set a date for it, I wasn't aware that we were actually launching on one of the initial Earth Days in 2019. It was only after the date had been set that that became clear. So today is a somber day for the entire world, and we all feel it. And we will absolutely be speaking to this quality of mourning in the poetry and music that you will hear. And I believe there is an appropriateness to beginning with poetry and music on such a somber day, and we'll talk about that. So let me begin with just a few words, really, about climate change and consciousness and why I organized this book fair. It is touching to me that people who attended climate change and consciousness have been moved to undertake the rather mammoth task of book writing. As an author of now almost 7 books, I say almost because one is at the publisher right now, and its next book, my next book, the next book that has arisen from that inspirational stream is now in process. It started virtually the day after I submitted the manuscript to my publisher. This wave of inspiration I feel extremely grateful for. And it's part of what we're doing here today is the result of that wave of inspiration. And that wave is what birthed Climate Change and Consciousness, which came to me on Election Day, November 2016. And everything that happened initially at Climate Change and Consciousness, the structure of it, the speakers, et cetera, was a wave of inspiration that manifested exactly as I received it. But what was not part of that wave of inspiration was who I would meet. I mean, I knew everybody who was coming because I had seen their applications. I had reviewed every single application, but I didn't know who these people were. And I didn't know that I would be forming lifetime bonds and collaborative partnerships. And I have to say that the first 2 people I set eyes on, the very first day that I walked into the main venue for the event, the first 2 faces, the first 2 set of eyes that I looked into were Clare Hedin and Rob Dillette. And Rob will be the featured speaker tomorrow, and Clare is with us right now. So that's auspicious to me. It feels like an incredible gift. So I want to introduce Clare Hedin. She and I are going to be collaborating once again today. And Clare is an incredible font of creativity. She is a musician, a filmmaker, an artist, and I call her the voice of the earth, which you will have an opportunity to experience today. I do want to point out that I have a similar feeling for Jen Kamo, that her voice also, and I've said this to her, feels like it's coming up from the belly of the mother. So Claire, please bring your voice into the circle and please share your feelings about this launch day and our collaboration in that regard.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yes, and welcome to Marion and Jennifer, who are part of this weaving already. I'm deeply touched by kind of the tragic nature of our aspirational joy. The way we have been designed to experience unity and the zigzagging that we do, especially within our species, which then gets inflicted on other species and ultimately the planet. But that we seem to be traveling a journey from ignorance and separation to realization and remembering. And one of the things Stephanie and I have touched on today, as well as in other conversations, is the nature of art or arts as a sort of a collective term for the impulse to express outwardly something that is occurring in the unity of our interiors. Like if you think of the Taurian, the energy flow, so that unity that's actually available within us, that I have conflict as I fluctuate towards and away from that feeling of unity and belonging, that the expression is personal, but it's also of all that is. So whenever we're being authentic, we are somehow serving in ways that are less measurable than Western science, but somehow serving the heart which aches to be in unity.
Thank you, Claire, for using that word unity. Because I feel that is an objective, a yearning. And our unity, our personal unity, the unity of this collective, which represents a much larger collective, small as it may seem to be, is surprisingly what will save us. And climate change and consciousness is built on that belief. It is the intersection of the personal and the collective. And you might ask, why does it even exist? Because the results of climate change and consciousness, again, to refer to what Claire said, are not really measurable. There aren't numbers or statistics that everybody always wants to see that reflect the impact of, let's say, a small gathering such as this. And I would say, in part, that is a mission for me, is to not be dissuaded by those measurable requirements that surround me. I'm married to someone who relies on data and uses it for the same objectives that we have here. But the data shapes the delivery, and for me, the opposite is true. And the fact that he and I can coexist with those different views very successfully is in itself a testimony of hope. So I've always been a writer, and those of you who know me know this is true, that I'm always encouraging people to write books. And I seem to have books in my blood, and that books have arisen out of the seedbed of climate change and consciousness, which from its inception emphasized the arts. Those who were there on the ground know that the arts were woven into every day, every event. We also always were orienting towards children and families. And I think that Jen has written a book for children, really addresses that orientation, plus the other central orientation of climate change and consciousness, which was to weave everyone into the web of life, to connect everyone intimately with the natural world. I'm not talking about looking at the natural world, admiring the natural world, taking photos of the natural world. I'm talking about finding our kinship with the natural world and realizing, and this is of course a component of what I teach in the Tara approach, and another blossom of climate change and consciousness, the Regenerative Health for a Climate Changing World MA PhD program, which also bloomed from that seedbed. I emphasize that we are kin, part of, intimate, family with the natural world. So we're going to have some conversations with Marian and Jen that I hope will be stimulating to those who will participate by recording. I'm going to be reading from one of my books that is absolutely the product of climate change and consciousness, The Great Physician, Medicinal Poetry for the Anthropocene. And I want, before I read, to credit Kindred World Media and Lisa Reagan, the publisher of Kindred World Media and the founder of Kindred World, which is an amazing nonprofit organization dedicated to children and families, dedicated to articulating increasingly our necessity for being woven into the web of life. So Lisa actually asked me for this book, which is, as a writer, a very touching experience. And another book that came out of climate change and consciousness, The Secret of Resilience, published by Inner Traditions. I had the same experience there. They asked me for the book, and it's floored me both times, and it will always floor me when people ask me for a book. Lisa just asked me for another book, so I guess I'm floored again. And Lisa, I know you'll watch this recording. I'll write that book. So the first poem that I want to read, all the poems will come from that book. And you can order the book if you would like at stephaniemines.com. All the proceeds go to climate change and consciousness. So what we're going to do here is Claire and I are going to jam, and we are going to improvise. We're not sure how this will evolve, but I trust that evolution. And the poems are selected in deep recognition of the somber quality of this launch day. So the first poem from The Great Physician that I would like to read is Broadcast from a Nation in Mourning. So as I read, Claire may engage musically, and she may also continue that engagement after the poem is complete. I invite your deep listening, and I'm extremely grateful for it. tutored by survivors of genocide, I recognize the signals. I am tutored by the survivors of genocide, and therefore I recognize the signals. Genocide of children is suicide spelled differently. The genocide of children is suicide spelled differently. That's the headline here in the United States of America. The headline here is the genocide of children. Words arrive twisted from the mouths of those who claim to speak for us. How dare they? Did we empower them? Only the voiceless require a spokesperson. Only marionettes, painted dolls manipulated by others, require a spokesperson. We can speak for ourselves. One woman's voice, one grandmother's voice, one defiant voice added to another and another and another. These can speak for themselves. Will your fingers pick up the bloodied thread of the weave that unites us? Will you pick up the bloodied thread of the weave that unites us? Can our voices from an ageless source live again within us? Can our voices from your ageless source live again within you? Can we interweave ourselves with all of the unrelenting voices that together clear a pathway through the lies? Let's together clear a pathway through the lies. One woman's voice, one grandmother's voice, one defiant voice added to another and another and another. As we take in the poem and the music, the words, the poem, the soundscape that Clare has provided, I would like to invite you, everyone in the room and those attending by recording, I would like to invite you to look at the question. Feel your way into the question, what is the value of poems and music in a time of mourning, loss, genocide, violence that is escalating? As we sit here together in our beloved communion, which is such a both a privilege and a joy, what is the value of that poem? What is the value of Clare and I collaborating and her sounding, her music, her expression coupled with mine together independently? What is the value of this in a time of increasing horror and escalating loss? I really want to hear. I am truly, sincerely curious how that question lands with you, what comes up for you. So please speak now and then later also as we continue. I really want you to gestate with that question. Jen, do you have anything you'd like to share right now in response to this question?
First of all, thank you to you both. A woman from Boston who has her PhD and is a tribal North African woman once received permission to share a kind of a guided meditation of how to travel from the mind to the heart. And she said, and it is known that it is one of the most treacherous, difficult journeys to travel from the frontal lobe to the true source that connects with the universe. And so as you were reading that poem, Stephanie, and just in hearing this question you're asking of me, that's all I could think of, is that if that alone is so much more than enough, if we can all find that distance and that journey. And so that's where I landed, and with your sounding, Clare, and I love all the little bones and the little wooden things that you bring in, because it feels like the wind is speaking. It feels like it's the ancestors speaking through those little, and then the power of your words, Stephanie. I mean, it's just that's so the journey to the heart. That's why it matters. Yeah.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. And Marian, did you want to say anything? You don't have to. Just, it's open to you now and throughout the program. You're muted, sweetie.
There we are. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'm going to apologize because I'm not as erudite as the previous speaker. I'm very grounded, and therefore I find it quite difficult to express these things as we've just heard. So my note here is that the poem and the music gave me the opportunity to develop some more thoughtfulness about the extreme issues of our time.
Well, that says a lot, Marion. That's very valuable to hear.
You're too kind, Stephanie.
No, I'm totally honest. Oh, Claire. Okay, thank you. I see your message. Yeah. Claire is inspired by the conversation, and her response is a poem that she would like to share, which of course I welcome.
Thank you. I've been visited by many poems recently. And this is called The Heart is the Weaver. Mm. Mm. It is being handed over. It is being handed over. It is being handed over to me to continue my lineage. It is both a lineage of biology, my own ancestors, but also a lineage of deep, deep culture, that of the voice, of music, of sound, of meaning. To transgress and elevate over, to dig under the obstacles, allowing oneself, allowing oneness to emerge, allowing unity to feel itself again through us. We are all carriers of this task. As we move and weave forwards, backwards, up, down, around, within, and through together. We weave the fabric of life into being again and again and again. In the listening is the pathway. In the pathway is the light directing us home. One home can have many doorways, many spaces to inhabit comfortably, that we may each feel the texture of ourselves, our skin, our souls, our stories, our loves, our losses, and become unified. Let the stories unite what is within us, what is between us. Our shared humanity is both our downfall and our elevation, our salvation. This thread, it travels through us. There is no one on the outside of it. The heart is the weaver, and we, the woven.
I am touched by the repetition of the word unity in all its forms. I am stimulated to share because of Claire's beautiful delivery and because I have no music to offer in response to it, to say that we are now in the interval between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Jewish New Year and the Day of Atonement. And in this interval, it is our job to cleanse so that we know that for which we must atone. Atone at 1 mint.
Mm.
And through Clare's words, I'm remembering, my grandmother, may she rest in peace, was a singer. She was a singer of Yiddish folk songs. That quality and capacity was not passed down to me, but it's in my lineage. And so I feel that Clare's soundings, which resemble the very particular quality of Yiddish folk songs, that are quite different from melodic songs, for instance, is woven, for me personally, into today. Climate change and consciousness is the intersection of the personal and the collective. And I, as a Jew, I am being woven into the web of life with my voice as a Jewish woman and telling my truth in this agonizing time. The next poem is I Am the Violinist in the Bomb Shelter. And this comes from a true story, and it is an oft-repeated true story. It has happened countless times, but there literally was a bomb shelter in Ukraine, and there was a violinist there who, in that bomb shelter, stood up and played the violin. There was also a child in another bomb shelter in Ukraine who stood up on a table and sang a song. And in these instances, everyone in that bomb shelter or in that refugee camp or in any gathering of the oppressed, everyone came into prayerful stillness as the power of life was remembered, even as their lives were at risk. I am the violinist in the bomb shelter. I rise with the rush of blood in my fingertips. That rush of blood is my love, and I rise with it. Each digit insistent, grasping, desperate, longing to touch the world. I rise with the flood of blood, the flood of love, the flood of hope in my fingertips. My eyes are draped with aching. My eyes are draped with aching for renewal. I am seeking here in this bomb shelter the springboard of humanity, the stunned remembering of our truth, the realization of our unity. Just as I, Stephanie, longed for my mother and father to stop killing each other, just as I waited and waited for them to say, we forgot about you, the vulnerable one. Please forgive us. Let us repair the world together as our faith decrees. Our faith decrees that we repair the world together. So does the violinist in the bomb shelter long for an awakening? That did not happen. That has not yet happened. That we are still waiting for. Just as my mother and father tore each other apart, shredding the words of unity, human family, protection, into strips of paper with the letters torn asunder. And just as I have spent my whole life looking to put back together those little shreds of paper, so do I now rise with the rush of love in my fingertips, like the violinist in the bomb shelter. The motion of reaching is so familiar, like the violinist in the bomb shelter or the cellist playing in the rubble of his homeland, or the child in the refugee camp standing to sing. I am reaching with them so that everyone becomes silent, remembering their own original brilliance. I am the violinist in the bomb shelter who continues to play whether or not anyone is listening. I am the violinist in the bomb shelter who continues to play whether or not anyone is listening. I am she who has become the violinist of the mother, delivering a sonata that is hers. I am the violin of the mother, longing to play for her children and feel them all close to her again. Claire, turn on original sound. Oh, Claire, I don't know if you have ever heard a Kaddish. Do you know
No,
what a Kaddish is?
not really.
Yeah. Oh, a Kaddish is the prayer of mourning
Mm.
that we say in the Jewish tradition. We repeat it for many days after the death of a loved one. And once again, with this weaving and the presence of the ancestors, the unseen in this gathering here, I feel you sounded almost exactly like you were chanting a Kaddish.
Mm.
Again, the question, so we are, and it feels very appropriate to me, in a state of mourning.
Mm.
So again, the question, in the Jewish tradition that I was born into, when someone dies, all the mirrors are covered. There is no media, there's no phone, there's no internet. Everyone goes into a deep withdrawal, and it's called sitting Shiva. And this Kaddish, variations on this Kaddish, are chanted by the whole family. And friends all come together in silence. It is a time of non-engagement and chanting of the Kaddish. What kind of activism is that? It is the opposite of activism, right?
Mm.
We're not protesting, we're not marching, we're not making signs. What is the value of entering a state of mourning? So many have been lost. We are unified with those losses. They are our losses. Yes, we are privileged enough so that we can have a nice dinner in a clean place with a loved one or a friend. But we are in a state of mourning. What is the value of that mourning to those who are starving, to those who are being hounded and brutalized, who have lost everyone? I'd like us to explore that. It's a difficult thing to explore, but I really would like to hear. I don't mourn easily. You know me, I am not someone who stops. My response to things is active and creative. But I am in a deep state of mourning. Of what use am I?
It is imperative that we mourn because it's what's true. When something is adrift, when things are not right, when there are people suffering, grief is the only answer. And it stops us from propelling ourselves forward in spite of, in denial of. and it reaffirms our unity, our familyness. It says something is wrong here. To do anything other than mourn or grieve is really not, to me, being fully human.
Mhm. Mm. And as you were speaking, what came to me, Claire, was that when I was listening to your Kaddish, I didn't feel taken out of the morning, but I felt resonant in the morning. I felt empowered in the morning, which is interesting because morning is such a collapse, but it didn't feel like a collapse as I resonated with your Kaddish. It wasn't like it made me want to get up and organize a protest, but it made it safe for me to stay in my state of mourning, like I knew that the Kaddish, and I don't know the history of the Kaddish. I'll consult my rabbi, Moish Givental, about this, but I would venture that the Kaddish was born out of a state of mourning, that it was composed, because the Kaddish is a prayer. It's chanted by everyone, but it's most eloquently chanted by the cantor in an actual service for the deceased. And I would venture that it was born out of a state of mourning. So that's the creative emergence that comes from staying in the state of mourning until the next gesture arrives. That's what came to me. I've never articulated anything like that before. Thank you, Claire. I'd love to hear others responding to this question. What is the value of the empty, mournful state, the non-active state?
May I make a comment, Stephanie?
Please, please.
I haven't your Jewish background, and so for me, the music was something different.
Mhm.
I thought about the child singing and the man playing his violin, and of course, for me, that was suggesting they were trying to help others to enjoy. The word enjoy isn't right, but experience the opportunity to sing or to listen to the music, and that took me down another route, because my aunt was a professor of music, and when she retired, she spent her time doing music therapy with severely autistic children through improvisation. And so it was quite interesting that you're listening to the music and the words took you down one route, and for me it took me to another route, which was, I think you'd probably say, I avoid thinking about unhappy things as much as I can. So Claire would say I'm not really dealing with it, I expect. But for me, that was what I was thinking about, the improvisation, the use of music, and how beneficial it can be for others. So it's
Thank you,
interesting
Miriam.
interpretation, totally different.
Yes, but I think aligned. with everything that we're saying. So let's welcome my husband, Bob Yunke, who's joining us after working in the garden. I know because I saw him doing that. Welcome, Bob. So we've just heard several poems with music, and we're having basically a dialogue about the value of art in a time of horror, in a time of violence. We're talking about the value of mourning for the horrific losses that we're all aware of. Today is such a somber day to begin a recognition of the books that have been seeded by climate change and consciousness. And the date was chosen because of the availability of the presenters. And then, of course, we realized that we were beginning on this somber anniversary. And so the poems and the music have been addressing that. And the conversation is, there are no statistics that tell us that poems or music or mourning results in, for instance, a change of legislative action about arms distribution or increased resources being made available to innocent victims, refugees who have lost their land and their family. We don't have any evidence that our poems and our songs and our gathering together to mourn and withdraw from action is of any value. So we are exploring, why do we make time for it? Why do we make space for it? Why do I write a book of poems? That is,
Well, keep in mind that our whole civilization was built around Homer's poetry. There was another era when there wasn't television and talking heads, but you know, he kept the memory of honor and heroism alive for a whole culture. And that's partly what you're doing.
Yeah.
You stand on tall shoulders.
So let's go to another poem. This one I wrote a long time ago, but it is valid today. So I wrote this poem when I was working in a remote rural area of Mexico. And my student had oh, we lost Marian. That happens sometimes for her. There she comes. Thank you. Great. Yes.
The recording, if I may, now.
I beg your pardon?
I'd like to leave now.
Oh, that's quite all right. It's
If you
late
don't
for you.
mind, I'll pick up the recording.
Oh, thank you, Marian. I realize it's late
Thank
for
you
you.
for being
Thank you
here.
for staying up so late. Thank you.
It's all right. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
for attending. Bye.
All right.
Good to meet you.
Thank you, Bob, and you too. Thank you.
So this student of mine had a brother who had been diagnosed as being mentally retarded early in life. And as a result, he lived with one caretaker out in a rural area. He had very, very few resources. And his sister wanted me to treat him. And so she took me out to this farm where he was just laying on his back in a field. and there were flies buzzing around him. Nobody was attending to him. And of course, she was so sorry to see him. She got a chair, she lifted him up. He was nonverbal. And I did treat him. And the experience led me to write this poem. It's called Before I Die. Before I die, my words will live in my cells, like my DNA. My words will live in my cells, like my DNA. My legs will walk my poems. Before I die, my legs will walk my poems. The words of my truth will be my wings that move my body wherever it is called from within, wherever it is called from within. And I will go fearlessly, effortlessly, like a bird, guided only by her interior compass. I will fly where I must to gather the lost tribes of the children of light, all those who have seen their legs torn from under them, all those who have been ripped from their homes. All these people, like me, are the messiahs of the future. And all of us together will fly as one flock going home.
Mhm.
Beautiful Clare. The sounds of the flocks flying home. So this poem brings up for me some very important questions that really are woven throughout everything that I'm doing, and climate change and consciousness in particular, which gave rise, as I said, to regenerative health for a climate changing world. And this experience of how people's profound healthcare needs are neglected. So this poem was inspired by someone in Mexico, and you might say, well, Mexico, that's Mexico. But I work with neurodiverse children here, and if you don't have money in the US to pay for aides and support teams, you're in the same exact position as Hector Pineda was on the field in Mexico. So we have a degenerative and decaying healthcare system that needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. And I started regenerative health. I mean, I'm the major faculty member. It's got a growing team of faculty. It has students, it has a cohort. It's very small. We are linked with Ubiquity University as the platform, the people who are credentialed to give the degrees. We're partners with them. But it's a very small effort tackling a mammoth issue. How does one keep going when one is so small and the situation that needs repair is humongous? That's one question. And the other question, I would say, is arrogance. I look at this. How dare I say, I will fly to all those in need, and we will join together as one flock going home? How dare I put that promise forward when I am so little? I can't achieve that. And yet I am declaring it. I am saying, and it is said in poems that I've written, we rise, we rise, we rise. How dare I say that? What arrogance to say that. So I just wanted to put those two things out there for a dialogue. How do we keep going when we see this huge challenge and we are very limited in the resources to confront it? And is it ethical? I really have this question. These are very sincere questions that haunt me. Is it ethical to say, we will fly, I will go wherever I am called, and we will fly as one flock going home? I'd love to hear from you, Jen. I see you nodding as if somehow these questions are familiar to you.
Well, you're a woman of such integrity. I would just throw that little question about, is it ethical, in the trash bin, because inspiration is your superpower.
Yeah.
And so what? So what? I think of what Charles Eisenstein has said, which is scale is an illusion. We have been programmed into thinking we must have 500,000 followers or such and such. It's an illusion of the world that we're in. And so if you rise with 4 or 5 in a cohort, wow, we just can't know the impact of that. And the other, I'm looking over here because I have this for my novel that's coming out in now March, but I have this little thing at the very top. Those are my characters, but at the very top is this quote. And the quote is from the fairies. Just because you cannot see them doesn't mean miracles aren't happening. And so that's how I would respond to your question. Just because you cannot see them. It's an act of faith to put the art out there, to put the music out there, to create the poems. And the world needs beauty, you know?
When Thomas Jefferson wrote, "All men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights," he knew that we as a nation were not fulfilling that promise. But it became an aspiration for a nation.
Mm.
And we still strive to fulfill that promise, even though we've never fully achieved that goal.
Far from it.
And that's what you're doing. I mean, Jennifer calls it inspiration, but to aspire to something beautiful is the beginning of the creation of that beauty. And the struggle to fulfill it is part of the beauty.
But I would like to, and maybe Claire can speak to this because she and I have been at this for quite a while. How do we keep going? You know, when it's not like we're getting huge returns, you know, it's not like we necessarily have enough to pay the bills. You know, it's not like we're getting applauded everywhere. Or we have an indication that our latest film or our latest sounding or our latest work of art is going to go viral, you know. How do we keep going?
I love both your questions. They're very familiar territory for me. I want to speak to the second one first, which is to say that it is really none of your business who you are in the doing of what drives you. It's not really your business how to measure it for its success. The thing that is truly unavoidably your business is the truth of your flight, of your direction, and the deep listening for the compass. And that's really all we can do. And that kind of leads to the other question. Because I say the first part because we drive ourselves crazy trying to quantify the qualitative. And yes, there are bills to pay. And because of that, in this first one about how does one keep going in an endeavor that is as much faith as it is vision, and how does planning relate to that, and sustainability. So what it's done for me, being on a sort of parallel path, it keeps forcing me to be a better skier. Like I have to keep pushing in to the ground. I have to keep reaffirming what's true for me, about me, what's still valid, what's still current, what's still alive. And it seems to me that the more, because consciousness is everything, the more we stay in true relationship to that, then all the projects and outcomes are kind of the water that we're cutting through as we sail. And again, that circles back to, and it's none of our business, because we can't be attached to outcomes. The vision is what sets us in motion. We have a plan, right? I want to see this happening, whichever this it might be for any of us. But that's the job. Measuring it with too harsh judgment, or perhaps too soon, like when a man plants an olive tree, does he go back the next day to see if it's ready yet? Does he go back the next generation to see are the children starting to pull olives? I mean, it's a lot of years before it yields fruit. So you're setting something in motion. You've planted an olive tree. And I say that thinking suddenly of Israel and Palestine. But when we think in terms of 10,000 years.
And Lebanon.
And Lebanon, of course.
Lebanon,
but when we think in a
olive
longer
trees.
scale, then we don't drive ourselves quite so crazy looking for what will ultimately be short-term returns on a larger scale. So as long as something's feeling truly like we still belong to it and it's still under our care, then we can just be careful with it. And
you know, you're really reminding me, Claire, of something that does keep me going. I mean, it's not quantifiable, but you're reminding me that what does keep me going, even when I don't feel people are listening, or like, why do I keep climate change and consciousness alive? You know, it's just really me keeping it alive. And maybe nobody really wants it or needs it. They don't need this marker of this intersection between the personal and the collective. But what does keep me going, even when the returns are quite small, is, and I think this may be part of the motive for the violinist in the bomb shelter and the cellist in the rubble, is skill, is I want to see if I can get better at this. I'm really, and I do feel this very deeply. I want to get better at writing. I want to write better poems. I want to write better stories. I want to write better testimonials, better statements about why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want to craft everything better. I want to lead better, so that there is this sense of the generosity, even of, you know, whoever shows up, that you're part of helping me get better at what I'm doing, and how much gratitude I have. And that keeps me going. It's not the returns. It's not how much money am I going to make from this? And of course, this is a deeply feminine orientation. It is not a capitalist. It is not a patriarchal orientation. But it's like a cup of coffee. It's like, you know, mushroom coffee. You know, it really keeps me going, is this promise. Well, I could say this better. And that's not to get more success. It's a craft. It's how do I make this better? So thank you, Claire.
yeah, well, you know, I was listening to you, and then I found myself also thinking what each of us here is doing, whichever of the things we're doing at any given moment, especially if it's a long thing, is a form of prayer. So in the doing of it, we're affirming it. And I can tell you, for me, I felt sad suddenly when at the thought of you ending climate change and consciousness. It's like, well, I need the marker. I need to see markers outside of me that I'm not the only one thinking this way, driven this way, caring this way. So there is a solidarity, it's of that unity piece again in seeing it. And of course, if it ever became so that it was not sustainable for you in important ways regarding health, mood, then it's time to ask again, perhaps. But there is value. There is value in what you're doing. You're affirming many people.
Well, thank you. So this feels like a good segue to kind of bring this to closure. I do want to speak to the regenerative health program and that last poem in the regenerative health program, just because you're not familiar with it perhaps, and maybe you can tell others about it who might be interested. We do have a wonderful cohort that is in process, and we will welcome a new cohort soon. We have physicians and clinicians in our cohort, people who are becoming clinicians, and the curriculum contains opportunities that aren't available anywhere else, like a program on the prenatal origins of health and cultural sensitivity as a healthcare necessity, and the use of the expressive arts as a healing instrument. And Claire, I have started a conversation with you about being part of the faculty, and
Yes.
I'd like to continue that conversation, actually. So we welcome incredible faculty with advanced degrees to present their programs and provide people with the opportunity to get an MA or a PhD in regenerative health. Despite it being a small and new program, it is rigorous. The courses are demanding. There is homework, and you do have to write a thesis. And we are partnered with Ubiquity University, which is credentialed to issue degrees. And they also have requirements. In order to get the degree from Ubiquity, you have to fulfill their requirements. So that's the partnership part of the program. I have developed the curriculum with consultation. It was not an easy thing for me to do. I'd never developed an MA or PhD curriculum before. But I consulted with one of my students who had developed curricula, and her father who had developed curricula. And as a result, we produced quite a stringent MA and PhD curriculum. And then Ubiquity has their curriculum, which is basically 3 programs that you have to complete in order to receive the degree. So if you know someone who would benefit from having an advanced degree, please send them to me. I'll be happy to talk with them. And if you're interested in being on the faculty, and Claire, I'm quite serious about having you on the faculty.
I'd love to. You know, I love teaching.
Yeah. And if you're interested, Jennifer, I know you have a master's, but I think it's in business. I can't hear you.
You're might be muted.
Engineering, it's engineering. Industrial engineering, the worst possible kind. Anyway, no, it has served me well, but it's not necessarily.
What kind of engineering?
Industrial.
Industrial.
Yeah, people systems, that kind of
I can
thing.
picture you with a hard hat on suddenly.
Oh yeah, you got it, sister. Good 20 years. Hard hat, steel toe, shoes, earplugs, the whole.
My gosh.
Well, there's still a lot of creativity in that.
Yes.
There is.
Yeah. Stephanie, no, I'd love to talk with you about that. We can set up a time.
Let's please do that. Yeah. I do want to acknowledge Kindred, the publisher of The Great Physician, and you can order the book at stephaniemines.com or directly through Kindred. It's Kindred set up stephaniemines.com, so you can order all my books there, but the emphasis is on The Great Physician. And for
It's
those.
also on Amazon.
It is on Amazon. Yeah, all my books are also on Amazon, but I don't need to tout Amazon.
No, no.
And it's on my bookshelf.
Ah, thank you. Thank you very much.
I loved your poems, Stephanie,
oh,
today.
Thank you.
They help. I can picture, they're very visual for me, the way they come in. So it makes them very relatable, like what you're describing or speaking to or of. You make room in the way you design your poems. It makes room for me to have a look around inside what you're depicting in a
Thank
very
you.
sensory way and emotional way and even intellectual.
Thank you. I loved Marion's comment about the impact of both the music and the poetry is that it allowed her to go deeper in terms of her understanding of what's going on in the world. As
that's perfect.
Really, it is actually. And she thought I was being kind by saying that, but I was being completely authentic. If that is something that is the result of art, it's so worth it, because that's really what it's about.
Yeah.
That's everything that it's about. So Marian, don't underestimate your reflections, please.
I just one tiny thing, I know we're trying to end, but I wrote down something. Stephanie and I had a few minutes together before the room was open for you guys to join us. And the question was there, like, well, what is the purpose of art? And actually, this might have been yesterday, even when we talked. And my immediate response was, well, what happens if we don't art? What does that world look like? And it became kind of an interesting contemplation. And somehow it hits more profoundly than trying to justify what it does to try and picture a world without any of it. And where would that, like, how much of ourselves would we be?
It's chilling, actually.
It would not be a human world.
Right.
Yeah, it's chilling to consider that.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, we're painting on the walls of caves 40,000 years ago.
There's an impulse that seeks expression.
And I love the way you become radiant when you say that, Claire. Clearly lights you up. Yeah.
Yes.
I want to remind everyone that this is the first in a series, and it's actually quite a remarkable series. Tomorrow, I will introduce the charming and delightful and brilliant Rob Dillette. And as I said at the beginning, I think it was Rob Dillette first and then Claire. They were almost like together in my first encounter of what is climate change and consciousness. There I was on the ground, finally, after 3 years of planning. And it was Rob Dillette and Clare Hedin. And Rob has co-authored a book, Cooling the Planet, which is really the synthesis of what he's been working on for as long as I've known him, that he is passionate about. The book is an incredible product, given how vast his thinking, how extraordinary his research, how much personally he has invested in this vision of what we can do to cool the planet, coming very much out of his experience in the Amazon. And then we also have Jen Camo, who has written The Inside of Me, a children's book, but it is also a book for everyone of all ages. It's an education. It is doing something that was a directive of climate change and consciousness in terms of assuring that everyone have kinship in the natural world. And she is offering this to the littles, but we know that all the littles come with bigs. And I want to share my friend Pam Leo with you. I don't know if you know Pam Leo.
No, I don't think so.
Well, Pam Leo is in Maine, I think in a different part of Maine,
Oh,
but
okay.
she is an author with Kindred World Media, the publisher of my book,
Ah,
and she is known as the Book Fairy in
oh.
Maine, and her life work is children's literacy. And so she has to know about your book because
Okay.
her job is bringing books to children and libraries and families and educational institutions. And she is an expert in literacy. So you've got to be connected to her. So I'll make that
Yeah.
connection.
Thank you. I've heard of the Book Fairy, actually.
Yes, she
But I
is the
didn't
book
know the
fairy.
name behind it. So, wow.
She is the
wow,
book fairy. And
wonderful.
she's in Maine, somewhere not
Yay.
that far from you. And we also have our partner, Trista Hendren of Girl God Books, which is a prolific publisher of books to uplift women, women's consciousness. And Trista is amazing in her output, and I am a contributor to her anthologies. So Trista will be talking about why she has created a publishing house dedicated to uplifting women. And then we have the incredible, totally elder wisdom woman, Dr. Anita Sanchez, on our final day. So it's, I think, a beautiful series. Please tell other people about it. And for those listening, if you would like to contribute to the sustainability of climate change and consciousness, you can do that at the same website where you registered for this program. So thank you for attending. Thank you, Marian, for your wonderful contribution. And please value it yourself. And I look forward to seeing all of you in the coming days and continuing
Thank
our
you.
collaboration, all of us, including you, Bob. Here's to continuing our collaboration.
Thank you so much for
Thank you
today.
both.
Thank you,
Yes,
everyone.
Thank you, Claire and Stephanie. And
I'll be
Bob.
reaching out. I'll be reaching
Aloha,
out to the
everyone.
two of you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Bye.
Much love.
Bye.